Hey friend, welcome back to the channel. I need your help in this video. I've painted 6 little color studies and I'm having trouble deciding which one I'm going to make into a big version first. And I got a little idea I want to sell you on. That is making color studies. Painting every big painting you attempt in your studio with hindsight. You see, I know where I'm going with my compositions because I've been there before. Taking this time, this vital step to plan things out, it's really where it's at. No more abortive work in the studio. No more wasting days and days on big paintings only to find you got to shift up your composition, change your value structure, or completely redesign those shapes. No, where it's at is with these little color studies. You see, whenever I do this, I'm so glad I went through the time, took the extra effort, and planned it out. Now, this might seem like an unnecessary step, but each of these color studies takes me about 2 to 3 hours, and you can pack a lot of detail into a tiny little study. So in this video, I want to walk you through my process, talk to you about some of the materials that I'm using, talk to you about some of that good old painting technique, but hopefully by the end of this video, you're going to be painting color studies too. All right, so first up, this is a little Rocky Mountain amphitheater that you can see when you pull up to the Homer Tunnel just outside Milford Sound in the South Island of New Zealand. And on that note, every subject here with these little color studies are the beautiful surrounds in the South Island of New Zealand. I'm so inspired by this landscape, so I really want to share it with you here. Now, you used to be able to pull over on the side of the road and see this view, but now they've blocked it off. They've put these big barricades up and you can't park your travel van, your bus, or your car there anymore, which is a real shame because you used to be able to walk up to the base of this waterfall and explore the area. I guess now they're a little bit concerned about avalanche risk and all sorts of other things, and so they've limited your access. But hey, we can go there in a painting, and I'm working from reference material that's several years old, but also is a combination of references from different times of day and in different conditions. What I really wanted to capture here with this little color study was that immense depth and scale of the landscape, but it's a bit of an extreme landscape because it's virtually without any midground. It just goes straight from that foreground to that background. The key thing here with this painting is that shift in value, bringing those deeper shadows into the immediate foreground and stepping that value back as we go into the distance. So raising those tones, raising how light those shadows are, that really does so much for creating depth. But I'm doing this in conjunction with my colors. Notice how some of those colors shift a little more blue and violet as we go back? Now I'm painting this with the same process that I'd work on that larger painting, starting off with big general shapes and working towards these fine little details, little patches of snow, ice, and trickles of water that are working their way down that cliff edge. Anyway, that's a first color study. Let me know what you think down in those comments below. We got another few to get through here. And as you can see, I'm taking a big sheet of linen here, taping it to an MDF board, hanging that on my wall easel, and just chipping away one color study at a time. Put these ideas away for later. I'm thinking about how could this make a bigger landscape? Could I create something powerful with real drama? Now, I want to tell a story across a body of work and show different aspects of the beautiful landscape that we have here in New Zealand. This is a native beech forest. The canopy is really open and you can walk right into the forest unobstructed, and it's almost like you're walking into a cathedral held up by these grand ancient pillars. One thing I liked about this scene was the dappled light that was filtering its way through those lofty branches and leaves high above. Now, I wanted to do something here with this scene, and that was hint at a landscape that opened up beyond the trees and invite the viewer to explore the open meadows beyond. Now, again, one of the things I'm thinking about continually is value. You might hear me talk about that a lot. I sometimes call this tone, but it's how light or dark something is. And really what these are is not only color studies, but value studies. I'm thinking about that arrangement of shapes and the overall design. Now, one thing I should mention is that with any of these color studies, I'm not getting bogged down in too much detail. I mean, sure, there's some fine brushwork here and there where appropriate, but the main thing is just looking at those overall shapes. Does it work as a design? If the big shapes work, the little shapes will take care of themselves. And I'll be able to see clearly what's happening here at a small scale. The other thing about doing a color study is I know, because I've laid this groundwork, I've got a clear indication about where the painting's going. And that is such a valuable thing. Oftentimes we're flying blind and we don't know where we're going to run into those pitfalls because we don't have a plan. I mean, you wouldn't build a house without a blueprint, would you? So in a way, this is my blueprint. But there's something vital about it. This is just the first step. I'm not too worried about getting things right or wrong here in this initial stage. This is just my first reaction to either my photographic reference, my plein air studies, or pencil sketches. What I'll do is I'll put it on a little color study like this, so somewhere around the neighborhood of 10 centimeters by 15 centimeters, or a little bit longer in some of these cases, but they're pretty small. So hopefully I can get it done within a couple of hours, maybe 3 hours max. But that little investment up front saves me so much time later on. Now, it wasn't far into this process that I realized that this tree over on the left-hand side really needed to move itself over into the composition a bit more. But I just kept on trucking, thinking, well, maybe I'll unlock some other techniques and some ideas with adding some of this light that's filtering down through. Applied here with an old trimmed fan brush to create texture, and then working back in with finer details using those ivory brushes and my zero riggers as well. Like adding a little bit of sparkle here to the water. Why not? Now, one of the things that I really love about these landscapes here is that you've got such a beautiful mix of those animals, so creating a little bit of life in the scene, but also those more static components like trees and rocks. I think this one came out pretty good. Let's move on to another one. Now, I'm not sketching up any of my compositions with a pencil. Here I'm just using a synthetic pointed round. This is a Shiraz No. 2 for those of you interested. I get these from Rosemary & Co. along with my other brushes that make the very best brushes in the world, in my opinion. I sketched the scene up with this synthetic round using a combination of burnt umber and quinacridone magenta. In fact, that's how I start most of my work. Whether it's a portrait or a landscape, it's the same combination. And it doesn't matter if I'm working in the studio or plein air. Now, this scene is inspired by a place called Paradise, which is a really appropriate name. It's absolutely beautiful. And if I'm honest, I've been struggling with this landscape for years, and I haven't attempted to paint it because it was just too beautiful. You ever come across a scene like that? That was just too picture perfect that you just couldn't figure out a way to do it justice? Well, for me, this is that landscape. I just love the way these mountains tower over that valley. And occasionally, if they pose just right, you can get some nice Herefords catching that afternoon sunlight. But if I'm honest, I've never seen the cows quite like this in this valley, so I had to make up a design and compose it. Sure, you could photograph cows somewhere else down the road and then just add them in later. So I was using a few photographic references here along the way. Now, I've made those references freely available, royalty and copyright free, over on Tish Academy if you want to check those out. And you can also see the full hour-long version of this color study video with complete instructions on how I painted each and every one. You can check that out by clicking the card on your screen right now or the link in the description down below. Now, I have a way of working in the studio. It does change up a little bit if I'm working plein air out in the field. But here in the studio, generally, I start with whatever's furthest away first and work my way forward, planning out those shifts in value, like we've talked about, and color. One thing I noticed about the landscape over the years that I've been painting landscapes is that our chroma, or color, gets a lot more intense as we come forward. One color relationship that I really enjoyed about this landscape here was that relationship of red to green. I want to get some really nice lush greens here in the immediate foreground, and I thought, what better color than the bright red shining off a Hereford cow to interact and complement that green. Anytime I get the opportunity to use complementary opposites in a landscape, I jump at it. It creates a much more dynamic and interesting painting. Now, occasionally we'll see little bodies of water, a stream, a lake, a pond, a river, what have you. And here, I'm using a bit of artistic license. The creek doesn't quite look like that, but who's to say in 10 years it might not jump course and carve another path into the landscape? Or maybe 100 years ago, it might have looked just like this. So I do feel free sometimes to use a bit of artistic license, even though it might not look exactly like this. But the key fundamental landmarks are there that most New Zealanders would look at this and go, yeah, that's paradise. I really enjoy this one. I definitely think this has what it takes to make a bigger landscape. But again, let me know which is your favorite down in those comments below. Now look, if you're interested in going pro with your art, I talk about that a bunch on my academy. This is one thing that I'm doing professionally as an artist. And if you don't mind, I'll just take a minute and explain to you why I'm doing this. I'm thinking in terms of bodies of work and tying it together thematically. When we create a body of work, there's a resonance between each and every painting. They start acting as a cohesive whole. It's not just isolated paintings with disparate ideas. It is a single body of work, a group of paintings. They start to talk to each other. And here, because I'm exploring very similar themes and subjects, it allows that theme to come through, and now there's strength within the group of work. As an exhibition, this ties together really well, and people can start to appreciate the bigger story that's going on here, not just with one-off paintings, but with an entire body of work. Now that said, rarely does a collector come in and buy the whole body of work, though it has happened. But I find that working in themes is really preferential to just having a bunch of work that doesn't seem to fit together. Now this idea might seem a little bit off the wall. We're high up in the mountains. This is a scene inspired by French Ridge, way up in the Matuki Valley, just outside of Wanaka in the South Island of New Zealand. I'm really inspired about this landscape because I've never painted anything quite like it. It's a really extreme type of scene where you're high up on a ridge, completely covered in snow, with that wind blowing across the scene, and the clouds parting just here and there to let just enough light to come through so you can see where you're going. I love the depth that's opened up here and how so much of it is just simple combinations of blue and white with the occasional little bit of the dark gray coming through where we have exposed rock. I definitely think this idea has legs. I'm looking forward to painting it on a monumental big canvas. But again, I want to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments down below. One thing that really helps me with these little color studies, I'm thinking about that technique continually, and I'm thinking about edge quality. One way that we're able to discern between one shape and another is because of some of the sharp edges here in this little painting and some of those softer edges where you lose masses in atmosphere and cloud. I'm really excited about exploring that in a bit more detail on a bigger canvas. And I know the road ahead because I've already been here. But I can make those changes when it comes time to paint the bigger scene. One thing I'm thinking about doing here is changing over those two peaks. Like literally picking up that mountain over on the right-hand side and swapping it with this peak here on the left. Yes, you can do that. In my pocket, I've got a card that says artistic license. Gives me the license to do whatever I dang well please. And you got one too. I'm sure you do. This one you may have caught during a live stream that I had here on YouTube some time ago. This is a scene just up the Matuki Valley outside West Wanaka Station. In fact, I'm on the opposite side of the river from West Wanaka Station. It's a spectacular scene, and I'm combining two different images. The mountains over there in the distance with this beautiful pond right here in the foreground, shot at different times of day and with slight different atmospheric conditions. But when we're exploring the idea and planning it out, like we are here in this color study, We can do all kinds of really cool stuff to really flesh out our idea. What I'm interested in doing as an artist is conveying a moment in time and capturing a feeling. I want to transport my viewer to this time and place, but it doesn't necessarily have to represent that photograph. It doesn't need to be a photocopy. Now, I've been accused of copying photographs, tracing from photographs, doing all that good stuff, but that's not how I work. I'm using photographs for sure. I'm inspired by those photographs, absolutely, but you got to take that idea and make it your own. Now, we all start off by copying from photos, and that's fine. They're a tool to be used. And hey, the greats used photographic reference. You don't think Bierstadt worked from photographs? In fact, look up Charles Bierstadt, who had a business in selling stereoscopic photography. Yeah, true story. So a lot of the greats, a lot of the landscape painters I hold in high regard used photos, but that's the key. They used the photo. They didn't necessarily copy them. They used a photograph to serve their idea. So you can see here how I've brought two of these images together, the atmosphere from one, the pond from another, and then I've added the cows here once again to just complete the story. One thing I like doing in my art is painting everyday stuff. You know, around here where I am, this type of rural subject, people see cows every day, and a lot of people walk on by. But I think it's my job as an artist, if I may be so bold, is to take the everyday and mundane for a lot of folks and represent it in a special way to get them to stop and look again. So there's my finished color study. Like the others, this might have the bones for a bigger painting, but I really need you to tell me what you think of those comments down below. Now on to our final little color study. And this, once again, is up my favorite valley, the Matukituki. Now I'm on the opposite side of the river looking towards Mount Aspiring, and I love this little creek here in the immediate foreground. Now, rather than moving up from the bottom right-hand corner in towards the left, I've got my creek coming in from the other way, the bottom left in towards the right, because I thought it led the eye in a nicer fashion towards Mount Aspiring way out in the distance. One thing I loved about this particular scene is that light that's pouring out of an opening in the sky. The way it clips those cliff edges and highlights some of that really interesting geology, I think makes this painting. So I wanted to explore it with a little color study. Now, I've recently moved towards these really gorgeous flats made by Rosemary & Co. These are Eclipse combers, and they work really nice on a little color study. They leave nice smooth marks, but the precision and control that I can achieve with this brush is second to none. By the way, in case you were wondering, these are all oil paintings, and I'm using Blue Ridge handmade oils. I'll link to all of my materials down in that description below. But if you want even more information on the processes, yes, we have the full version over on Tish Academy, but you can also read about it in my blog, and I've made a blog post for this particular video. Click that card that's just appeared on your screen, and again, you can find that link down below. I'm continually drilling the fundamentals and repeating these over to myself as I paint, even if it's a little color study. The four things that I have within my control are line and shape, so my linear aspect. This is my drawing, my composition. I then have my tonal values. I also have color, and I have my edge quality. If I do a really good job with these four things, my parameters in which I'm working, then I can achieve a convincing sense of form, depth, light, and material. But really, that's all I have. Line and shape, tone, color, and edge. So it doesn't matter if you've been doing this for 20 minutes or 20 years, you're never going to escape those fundamentals. And I have to frame it in this way to keep it straight in my mind as I'm painting these pictures. I love lost edges. When you're painting skies, clouds, and atmosphere, it's all about softness, sharpening it up just in the right places. But that's how we achieve that sense of material. It's because of these points of difference between those brush marks and how they meet each other. So achieving the right edge comes down to the right tool for the job. For some real sharpness, Right here in the foreground, I'm using my zero rigger, and up here for some of the softness in that sky, I use those flats, those synthetic flats. Then finally, I had a few accents of texture and detail here to the immediate foreground. I think this idea is pretty strong, but it needs some work in the immediate foreground. I might have to bring those cows a little bit closer, but hey, you tell me. So next time you go to paint a big landscape, or anything for that matter, plan it out and study your composition. This exercise pays dividends. You become so much better at painting, you can get through work a lot quicker, but you can plan that road ahead so you're not wasting a bunch of time on the bigger stuff. I can make changes here at a small scale, and I can do that relatively quickly before moving on to the big piece. Anyway, we've got 6 color studies that we've achieved. I'd love to hear what you think in those comments down below. Which one was your favorite? And if you haven't painted a color study yet, give this a go. Guaranteed it will really improve your landscapes. I'll see you in the next one.